versus Janesville.
Wage stable, same wages?
Yeah, I mean, they're all union members, so that contract was good for all of the people under that contract.
Oh. Do you think the recall?
Do you want to explain it?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
My bigger question was, in your opinions, the recall spending $700 million and basically ended up 700 million, right?
70 million. 700 million would really be outrageous.
I fortified the position of keeping Walker in, and basically, I don't know, I think looking back on it, it was the worst decision ever made. People were pissed and they just went after a victory which was not even had. What do you think?
Do you want to talk about the two-tier wage?
Well, I'll talk about the wages. So in Fort Wayne, the UAW, is a nationwide organization. So because of seniority, Angie and Gail were able to keep the same wage that they had at Janesville when they transferred to Fort Wayne. In new union contracts that got negotiated with GM, they created a two-tier system. So there was a year cutoff. I can't remember how many years seniority, but if you were above a certain year of seniority, you could keep your wages. But if you're coming in new, you get half of what these seniority people were. So the new, the first tier wage is like $14 an hour, where higher seniority is like $28 an hour.
And people are working next to each other on the line, making vastly different amounts of money.
I think your point about the recall is a really good one. I feel like, and it's funny because sometimes I feel psychotic talking about this film a little bit, because on the one hand, during the whole recall thing, while I was being a documentary filmmaker first, and not giving any money, not even putting a sign, anything near me, for a lot of reasons, because part of the film went viral back in May, and I wanted to be careful not to get raked over the coals. But during that whole thing, privately, I was, of course, my politics are well known. I mean, I wanted that the recall would be successful. But I think what I started to learn from Tim over the course of following him, and where I've ultimately landed, which is not a consensus view, by the way, among the filmmakers, is that the real problem we're facing right now is the intensity of political polarization in our country, and that's what leads to the absurdity of spending $70 million at a time when the state of Wisconsin and every state in the union, with the exception of North Dakota, I believe, has a deficit, is cutting services for people who need them. You see Cindy she's playing by the rules, as Bill Clinton used to always say, and she's still barely at the end of the day able to succeed, but not without going as close as you can to losing everything before she's able to pull it all out. And you think about that kind of absurdity, and you think about Tim Cullen, who goes through this film believing, I think at his core, that being involved in politics and being an elected official is an honorable profession. And I share that view, which might be very Pollyannish of me. And I think that it's incredibly sad. I think of him as a tragic hero. And I think it's incredibly sad that we are at a moment now that the Pew Research Center tells us is one of the most divided times in our country. So I hope the film, if nothing else, can help push us a little bit out of those ideological encampments, at least to a place where we can hear each other.
Here.
Sorry, this is
You want to.
Oh, okay, sure.
You want to remember that $70 million was not all Wisconsin money.
Yeah.
A lot of it went into the state from outside of Wisconsin. Actually, was put into the Wisconsin economy as a result of the election. And nobody said democracy is cheap. Democracy is going to be cheap. But my question is, you had three storylines that all three of them seemed of the workers, and they all seemed to have survived. Were there other storylines that you followed where they did not? And if so, what were those?
Right. Well, there was a very conscious choice on my part for two things about the workers we chose to follow. One was I was very interested in people who were very solidly in the middle class, because I think that's something that's really in jeopardy in this country. And I wanted to unabashedly show that. I don't mind that Tim is standing next to an Escalade when he's saying that we're going to survive. I think that's a challenging image, and I want people to wrestle with that. Another is that I chose to follow women also, for a different reason. But I was really interested in caregivers and the dilemma that they faced, as opposed to a story I think we've seen a lot of, which is men who've lost their jobs, which is not that that story is not important and valid. And then I was concerned about the fact that there were people out there who were not like Cindy and jumped into school, not like Angie and Gail, who had the union and had the ability to transfer to another factory, even if that, obviously caused all kinds of hardships. And we started to worry about that enough that we started to follow another person, and spent maybe 3 months pursuing him. Not that long, because it became apparent to me that I used to work with an editor who was not as good as Leslie. No, he's wonderful. I worked with a very talented editor named Tom Henneke, and he used to always talk about how there's a moment in the film where you really understand the song that it's singing. And I think we started to really realize that about 3 or 4 months into working together, even early in the demo phase, so before we even started editing the full film. And part of that is that you then are able to figure out what's not part of your movie, even though obviously it's a very sweeping subject. So that's one reason why we chose not to pursue a story of someone who had really kind of fallen off the ledge into abject poverty, even though we spent a little bit of time filming one of those stories. Thanks for the question. So we're going to do 2 more, and then I'm happy to hang out, and I'm sure these guys are too. So, but I'm sure there's another movie in here. Oh, yes, and I want to invite people to the Lichtenstein. Okay, wait. So I'm going to take this time before we do the last 2 questions. Is that first of all, people who came to the film can use their stub for a discount. Is that what it is? At Lucky Strike? You take your stub to Lucky Strike, right? You know this, the film festival helped us with this. And you get a discount. And we're all going to go to Lucky Strike. And so all the extended 371 Contemporary family, your presence is obligated. And everybody else can come join us. You're welcome to come join us. And the other thing I just want to point out before we go to the last 2 questions is that also here is Colin Seitzma, right over here, who was our production associate. And then I just wanted to also point out, is Justine still here? Justine Nagin of Contemporary Films was here, and Gordon Quinn is still here, and we could not have possibly made this film without that. Okay, last 2 questions. Yes, right here.
This is also beginning to air on public television. It was on Independent Lens this week. How has the feedback you've gotten from television encouraged what you're doing with the film, and has it been beneficial or hurtful towards screenings?
The question was, the gentleman points out that we already aired Monday night on Independent Lens, which incidentally, we originally were going to air later, but PBS felt like it was really important for this film to be out there earlier and people to be able to talk about it during the election cycle. So we aired October 8th. We're airing again, by the way, January 28th, near the inauguration. And you can keep up with everything we're doing by liking us on Facebook, which I really hope you do. There was a really interesting discussion just today by someone who had a lot of criticism of the film, which I really encourage. So please like us at facebook.com/AsGoesJanesville, which also happens to be our website, asgoesjanesville.com. The question was about whether also this has kind of hurt us in terms of screenings. I gotta say, the schedule for this film has been kind of all forgotten. We started out, finishing a film right at the end of the festival season. And I have to say that we're deeply honored that the Chicago International Film Festival chose us. Yes. In the end, though, what we're starting to realize is that the film being out there on television, the Biz Lab screenings that we're putting together, and now this sort of continuing interest among lots and lots of festivals around the country is actually great, because we're getting to go to communities that we really want to see this film, and we're able to organize Biz Lab efforts around what we're doing. I should mention one other thing too. We're launching an app in January called BizViz, which means making business visible, and that builds on the corporate transparency line in the film. So well, wait till you hear what it is. It's really cool. So basically, you take your mobile phone, take a picture of a logo or a product. I mean, like almost any product, and it will tell you what the company is, how much tax they paid against the corporate tax rate, what their employment practices are. We'll probably have CEO pay in there by the time we launch. And we're also going to have in there campaign finance data. So our partners with the Sunlight Foundation, Citizens for Tax Justice, and Good Jobs First are helping us with all of the data, which is massive. But it'll put that kind of information in the hands of consumers so that you can consider the corporate practices when you're making decisions about what to do with your money.